everybody. Really looking forward to this evening's IGTV with Dr. Frederica, who is amazing. She's a medical scientist and a nutritionist, and we're going to talk about the evidence that's there to support some of the claims that are made about nutrition and about food. So hopefully she's going to join me quite soon, and we can get off to all of the questions. Got lots and lots and lots of questions, so I've put them into different categories, and you'll be able to ask questions as you come along as well.
Hi.
There you are. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm really good, thank you. I'm so glad to speak to you today.
Oh, thank you so much for coming on. And I think, I met you first when we were at that event when you did a talk at the Air Baths, and I was just sort of like so impressed by you and how, but how easy you made it all seem, because sometimes it can be so complicated. And like you, I feel that there's so much noise on the internet and social media at the moment from non-experts, but there's some good stuff out there, but there's also some terrible things being said. And women are at a time when they're quite vulnerable. They're going through all of the tyranny of the shoulds and shouldn'ts, and it becomes very complicated, doesn't it?
It does. And I agree with you. It's such a vulnerable time, and it's such a it's tricky because it's almost like a prey-like behavior to say, oh, are you pregnant? Like, you have to do this, because of course you're pregnant, you'll be, oh gosh, like, what is it that I need to do? It becomes really stressful. It's already often a really stressful time, and I think that providing advice or recommendations that are not evidence-based is really problematic and actually, potentially risky. So yeah, I feel strongly about the noise.
But will you just explain a little bit about what you do? And you have got a book coming out as well, I think, soon.
I have, yeah. So I'm a medical scientist, and my background is really in public health. So I've spent many years researching public health, and I have a real interest and focus on improving public health through women's health in the first 1,000 days. So from conception to second birthday. I'm also a nutritionist. I work for Zoe, the personalised health company, and I'm still a postdoc researcher at Imperial College. And I also teach Imperial College medical students nutrition.
Oh, so cool. And you see clients as well, don't you?
I have quite not many clinic hours now left, but I see clients through Curia Health, which is a medical concierge company. So we offer a 360 service with a multidisciplinary team. So I work with doctors, and we give like a full, full holistic overview of clients to help them achieve their health goals, essentially. Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Okay. So I'm just going to come on to some of the questions and talk about some of the common things that are asked. And one question that comes up so much, Frederica, is about fasting if you're trying for a baby, if you're going through IVF, because it's become the norm now, isn't it, to do intermittent fasting for 2 or 3 days a week. I mean, what are your views on that in terms of fertility?
So I think, thank you for asking. Basically, I have to be really, really clear here. The evidence that we have on intermittent fasting in human trials, especially, right? Because there's nice trials that have been done in like zebra flies and like worms and maybe some mice. But when we're looking at human trials, we're really looking at trials that are trying to help people reduce their weight when they have obesity. So the majority of the clinical trials that show a positive beneficial effect of intermittent fasting, and they range from having a 4-hour eating window to 10-hour eating window, they mostly are looking at, can we help people reduce their body weight when they have obesity? So the evidence we have to show that it could be helpful in those situations. So of course we do have, in the UK, we have a growing population of women who are becoming pregnant with obesity. So if that is a concern before you conceive, before you start trying to conceive, then possibly intermittent fasting could be a route for weight loss, okay? But again, these trials have been quite small. It doesn't mean that it will apply for everyone. And there are no human trials that is going to help with fertility. None.
Okay.
Zero.
But is it, is it detrimental to do? Because, when you're, around ovulation, when you're starving your body, there are consequences, aren't there?
Of course. Now, I like this idea of really taking it back to the basics, which is when we think about evolution and we think about biology, right? If our body feels that we are not in a safe place, so if we're not nourished enough, if we don't have access to nutritious food to support a pregnancy, we know that pregnancy is, of course, a big undertaking biologically. So if we try to conceive with the signals given to our body that there is not a sufficient nutritious diet, then of course our body is not going to encourage pregnancy. So it's actually counterintuitive to think that changing our food supply to decrease nutrient density over the day would help. Quite the opposite. We know from when people become ill, high stress situations, starvation, rapid, one of the first things to go is our regular cycle.
Yeah.
And that's not a safe time to become pregnant.
So you wouldn't encourage it?
No, of course, no. It wouldn't encourage it, and the actual quality of the eggs would be impacted, and that the endometrial lining would be impacted. So there's also a risk that whilst you may still ovulate and become pregnant, the actual setup for pregnancy is not ideal, because we know we have much higher nutrient requirements for successful conception and pregnancy.
And it's interesting as well, because, I really like the 1,000 days. I sort of base a lot of what I do on as well. And I think, when you're going through fertility, you're just so focused on getting pregnant. A lot of the women I see know nothing about being pregnant. They know everything about fertility. And it's really important trying to get through that message, that lead up to getting pregnant, your baby as it develops during these 1,000 days doesn't rely on what you eat in any one day. It relies on your nutritional reserves. So building those up prior to getting pregnant, whether you're trying naturally or going through IVF, is absolutely key, isn't it?
Oh gosh, yes, music to my ears. Yes. And conception advice or education in this country. So women will, 60% of pregnancy are not, which is huge. So most of us go into pregnancy not prepared or not having those foundations absolutely required. For egg health, so we know the egg takes 3 months to mature. So that in that time, the nutrient availability helps to mature that egg and at the same time, we also know in the first trimester, so in the first 10 weeks before the placenta is formed, the egg needs to succeed to become an embryo and implant into a healthy placenta, with a healthy placenta come from our nutrient reserves.
Yes.
From the lining, which secretes this sort of in the womb space, and that comes from others as well. So yeah, you're right. If we go into pregnancy depleted, it impacts the pregnancy or even pregnancy. It impacts it and the ability of the body to create the right environment for a successful pregnancy.
Yeah. So while we're on ovulation, a couple of questions have come through on ovulation. One is about drinking alcohol in that window of ovulation, and the other one is about medication. If you're taking medication when you're sort of trying for a baby, such as antidepressants. So this sort of is a repeated thing that comes up. So what are your views? Like I know that when you're pregnant, absolutely no alcohol, and I really believed in that before even the studies came out, or the government was saying you can have 14 units, but I really do believe that it's detrimental in pregnancy. But what's so hard is if I think the odd glass of wine isn't going to help you, but I do encourage women to avoid it during ovulation, because we don't know. Where is the evidence for that?
So it's interesting. It's a really good question. I think the main evidence we have for alcohol, right, is that it is a cancer-causing neurotoxin.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of the day, whichever way you hash it out, it is a neurotoxin. And when we are creating, one of the first things that happen is the creation of the nervous system. So, and then obviously throughout pregnancy, it still continues to grow. Now, I think there's a really fine line between the stress of fearing everything
Mm-hmm.
that really impacts fertility and success of pregnancy. And as you said, if you're having an odd glass of wine with a meal, with water, then that neurotoxin, the alcohol itself, is likely to be cleared out by your liver in time before it has a negative impact. So we have to be pragmatic, but I think that we also have to remember that at the end of the day, alcohol is bad for us. It's harmful.
Yeah.
So it's a delicate time in conception and early pregnancy and throughout pregnancy. You know, if we can avoid it, then I would avoid it. It's one of those things, Zita, that when I talk to my clients about this, there's a lot of other influences that we can't control.
Mm-hmm.
So air pollution, the endocrine disrupting chemicals that we around, right, in our environment, that we can't always control. So alcohol is one of those things we can control. And my view is, if we can just not drink for the time that we're trying to conceive and pregnant, that would be beneficial overall.
Yeah. So, and especially, you know, I always encourage women that are going through IVF in that preparation period, 4 to 6 weeks before, not to have any alcohol. Is that the same for the male as well? You know, a man, it takes sort of like 100 days to produce sperm.
Yes. So in men, there have been studies that have looked at sperm alcohol, and we know that alcohol does impact sperm quality and motility. So actually, you know, if trying to get pregnant, men shouldn't be drinking as much either. Now, again, if they're stopped completely, that will be them for a little break, and it would be beneficial for their sperm. If they're not able to stop completely for whatever reason, then certainly sticking to 1 or 2 drinks maximum, 3 or 4 times a week maximum with food will be really helpful. There's other things as well that I think, so I'm glad you brought this up too, because actually we know that men's health has just as big as women's health. So men's health in creating the highest quality possible sperm is really important, and for different reasons. So, interestingly, you know, if a man is obese or very, very inactive, very sedentary lifestyle, that results in an increased risk in things like autism, and so more on the behavioral side.
Yeah.
So we know that things like bike riding and lifestyle and pressure actually can reduce sperm count by up to half. So the bike riding one I was really shocked with.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. So there's things that men should definitely look at. Their own diet. That there are certain nutrients that are specifically good for sperm quality and motility, such as zinc, which and looked at omega-3 as well. So it's really, and it's timely, because both men and women need to start thinking about this 90 days prior to when they're trying to conceive or have IVF.
Yeah, and it's you know, and it's a long time, isn't it, for many women? Which brings me on to another question about sugar. How bad is sugar? And I think, you know, what's difficult for women, they are ruled by their moods, their foods, and their hormones. And one of the questions I've got here is that this woman in the PMS phase gets terrible cravings for sugar. And then for a lot of women, they're not pregnant, so it just makes them more and more miserable. So how detrimental is sugar?
So I think we have to distinguish between different sugars.
Yeah.
So I think sugar is contained in lots of foods, and it's also added to foods. Really, our understanding such as fruits, whole grains, certain legumes, chickpeas, so they all contain starches, but they really are good for our health overall. So there is no doubt that eating fresh, whole fruit, vegetables, and legumes and whole grains is really beneficial for us. I want to stress the whole fruit side, because that is not necessarily true or the same for juices and extract fruits that have been sort of mixed up or tampered with. So it's not so much about fearing all sugar, but it is about being very mindful of added free sugars to our diet. So things like sugar sweetened beverages, adding 3 or more teaspoons of sugar to your tea, or any sugar to your tea and coffee, syrups in coffee as well. A question about frozen fruits. Frozen fruits are wonderful because they are whole fruits, and actually freezing them makes them longer lasting, so you can keep them for longer, and actually retains some of the vitamins better than frozen fruits are great.
So do you disagree with green juices and juicing then? Do you feel it's not as beneficial for you?
I think eating the whole, there are obviously exceptions. So for example, people who have like a reduced eating capacity for whatever reason, or people who really would benefit from having that additional, having high in nutrients in a liquid form, there are always exceptions, but generally as a whole, eating your fruits and vegetables in any situation.
Okay. And what about, like certain fruits have got a higher sugar content than others. So do you have any advice on that? Sort of like in the fertility world, the pineapple is king in terms of what it contains, and there's always these myths going around, and I'm always trying to persuade women it's not just one food. It's not about a pineapple or a beetroot or whatever. It's the whole thing. But they're quite high in sugar, aren't they? Sort of things like pineapples.
Yeah. So certain fruits are higher in sugar, especially if there's a woman who has gestational diabetes, or she has a risk for gestational diabetes. We would recommend that she looks at enjoying certain fruits paired with other foods or at the end of a meal, so not in isolation. So for example, like a banana is a really classic example of a higher starch fruit, but it's not about not eating a banana. It's just about maybe having that banana with some peanut butter or some yogurt, or at the end of a meal, so that you don't have the isolated starchy load by itself. But really, honestly, whole fruits and a variety of whole fruits is so beneficial. Berries are exceptional because they're so concentrated in polyphenols, the colorful plant chemicals that are really helpful, really good for so many things, including reducing inflammation. They play a really pivotal role in helping. All colorful fruits and vegetables are really, really important to have. And I think, looking at what's seasonal. So right now, enjoying peaches and cherries and strawberries, and then throughout the season that changes. So certainly, like eating pineapple all year round is going to be quite boring, and actually won't deliver the diversity of nutrients and the diversity of plant chemicals that we really want to get.
Yeah. One of the things that I was really interested in the talk that you gave was about the 2 spoons of oil being really rich in polyphenols and very, very good for inflammation. And I've actually taken that on board, and I try and do it every day. It's not particularly pleasant, but I manage it, but I thought it was really interesting. So just explain about that in the study.
Yeah, so extra virgin olive oil is exceptionally high in polyphenols. So olives themselves are very high in polyphenols, and extra virgin olive oil is essentially the concentrated olive juice that has all the polyphenols. So extra virgin olive oil specifically, that's the one we want to go for. And the study that I was talking about was PREDIMED, which is a study where they took some participants for the study and gave one arm a Mediterranean diet with added olive oil. So Mediterranean diet already has extra virgin olive oil, of course, and they gave them even more. Then the other arm of the study, the Mediterranean diet with added walnuts. And so the point of the study was to see whether it was something specifically about the extra virgin olive oil that had this really beneficial effect. And then there was a third arm of the trial who didn't receive, they just had a normal diet, like a normal Western diet. And they had to stop the study. So it became a very famous study. They had to stop the study because the group who weren't receiving the Mediterranean diet fared so much worse in terms of health outcomes that it wasn't deemed ethical for the study to continue. So it is, and it really established. I mean, the Mediterranean diet is the best known, most well studied, well characterized positive dietary intervention that we have. So whenever anyone says, I just don't know, like you know, is there really any evidence? Okay, Mediterranean diet.
Yeah, I mean, it's been shown for fertility, hasn't it? And
Yes,
IVF outcome as well.
I actually published a review of the evidence for Mediterranean diet and pregnancy outcomes, and it's phenomenal. It's amazing. So the PredyMed, the extra virgin olive oil, so added the 2 added tablespoons, did even better than the Mediterranean diet plus walnut. I would recommend just putting it in a dressing, though. I don't think, I love extra virgin olive oil, but I don't think even I could take it just.
Well, I just it's become a habit, which is fine, and you know, and I know some people feel sick on it. I don't particularly, so I'll carry it on. But it's interesting about the Mediterranean diet, isn't it? Because with going through fertility, there's so much, you know, like within a portion. So protein is really important, especially when you're going through IVF. It's not a natural state to be in. You're growing lots and lots of eggs. So, you know, what are your views on how much protein and low carbs for going through IVF?
So, thank you again for this question. It's a gift. So really, the evidence shows us that the main things are to have, which include complex carbohydrates. So the beauty of plant protein is that it comes from things like nuts and beans and chickpeas. Then of course there's tofu, which is very high in protein, soya beans. All these foods give us the benefits of more protein, also give us the benefits of complex carbohydrates and the plant chemicals, that polyphenols we spoke of. Now, this is not to say that vegan pregnancy is hard to actually get right. So it's not really about that. We still want to have high quality eggs, and high quality salmon would be my 2 top animal products. And actually we have plenty of evidence around calcium preventing preeclampsia and complications. So your natural, full fat natural yogurt, those would be my main 3 sort of animal intakes when trying to conceive and in pregnancy. You know, if someone said, oh, I don't really want to eat animals, like I don't really like eating beef, I don't really eat like that's fine, that's not much of an issue. Of course, eating good quality beef gives us a huge dose of lots of nutrients, so if you do enjoy that, that's fine. But it's not as I would say, like as crucial as making sure we get plenty of plant protein, the fatty fish, and eggs, which are just, I mean, eggs are, I can't say enough good things about eggs.
Yeah, eggs are very rich in choline, aren't they? And choline is so important for the baby's brain if you get pregnant in early pregnancy. But it's quite interesting because there was the Harvard study, and that was done a long time ago, wasn't it, on eat ice cream, you know, full dairy, full fat dairy milk, etc. And I think, you know, what you see now is so much stuff is being cut out, you know, and you think that low fat yogurt is better than full fat yogurt, and margarine is better than butter, and it isn't. You need the fats, don't you?
Did you see the Kevin Hall study that came out last week? So Kevin Hall, who famously ran the ultra processed food trial, just on the impacts of low fat foods on the brain and of low carbohydrate foods. So these to be either low fat or low sugar, and the results were astounding. So the low fat foods, the participants who are on the low fat foods, they're actually, and
you're breaking up a bit, Frederica, in the microphone. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me just get closer. Is that better?
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
The trial showed that having the low fat food that was sort of made with emulsifiers and had increased sugar to make up for the low fatness changed the brain's reward center and resulted in people actually seeking more snacks that were higher in energy density. So a breakthrough study. And you're right, all of these low fat, low sugar, you know, even just the foods that are aimed at cutting out entire food groups, we know they're really not helpful for overall health. They're very often ultra processed as well, which is problematic for health. We can see there's lots of studies that are coming out associating ultra processed food with adverse health effects. And even in conception and pregnancy, we know that women who consume more sugar sweetened fizzy drinks have worse outcomes. highly refined carbohydrates. So, packet biscuits and pastries from the supermarket, all of these things are really not great to have. They're not associated with good health outcomes at all for mothers who are trying to conceive and pregnant.
Yeah, because I'm not an advocate of snacks in between meals at all. You know, I think it's really important not to, because I think it's sort of, you know, makes your blood sugars sort of fluctuate. And there was a phase that I noticed in my clinic where a lot of the young nurses were getting Graze boxes and all of these things too, and they're continually eating during the day, which, you know, is not giving them a rest at all.
No, and it's also, it means that they're not getting, you know, the idea, in an ideal world, meals that we eat, we're providing all the nutrition and energy we need until the next meal.
Yeah.
What can often happen if we get used to snacking, we don't actually end up having very satisfying like meal times. So I think occasionally, if you're hungry, then view that snack as a complete opportunity for nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
Don't just grab, you know, rice cakes. I detest rice cakes because they offer nothing,
Yeah.
and they don't do anything for your satiety or for your nutrition.
Yeah.
So instead, you are feeling peckish because you maybe didn't have enough lunch. Make that opportunity a chance to get nutrient dense foods in, because that is what your body is asking for.
Yeah, I was shocked when I read in it's one of the Sunday papers, they gave the nutrient density of food, and like croissants have got no nutrition in them whatsoever, which is highly disappointing.
But some foods are there to give us joy, which is fine. But we need to distinguish the two, right? So, and I think in conception and pregnancy, nutrients, we need so much, we need so many of them. So prioritizing that, and then of course having something that brings you some joy, because we all love a hot buttered croissant, especially if we're but that isn't going to provide the nutrients we need, but it will provide the joy. So just make sure you add some nutrients with it.
Berries. The other thing you touched on is there's lots of faddy diets around at the moment. So I don't mean, you know, veganism is faddy, but, you know, that people go in and out of different diets. So keto is quite big, and, you know, a lot of young women that come to me are vegan. What are your views on both of those in terms of fertility?
They're very different. Veganism is obviously usually an ethical and moral choice, and I actually understand it. And I know some people who are very successfully vegan and get a job. My concern with veganism is that you need a lot of resources, a lot of education, and a lot of monitoring. Make sure you're getting the nutrients that are typically only found in animal foods through plants alone and supplementation. So if somebody is vegan, they certainly should be looking at supplements, because it's really difficult to get certain nutrients like B12, iron, choline, zinc from plant sources. So really important to get some help from a dietitian or somebody who has experience with vegan diets. And it's just for me personally, you know, I was actually vegan before my first pregnancy, and I decided to stop and reintroduce some animal foods because I wanted to have a child. So I think through pregnancy and fertility and pregnancy, I would suggest that would be a time to reintroduce some animal foods, not least because we want to reduce the risk of allergies, and exposure to allergens such as eggs, fish, and dairy in pregnancy reduces the risk of that child having the allergy themselves. So
and it is hard to get the protein, isn't it? And to get good protein, you've got to really work at it. And for me, I see a lot of young women that lose weight as a result, and weight loss isn't great for pregnancy. But I also see women that are vegetarian and vegan, and when they do get pregnant, they start to crave chicken and meat. You know, it's just incredible what the body does, isn't it?
It is true. You need to eat a lot more food to get the same amount of protein from plants. And as you said, especially when you are pregnant or when you're undergoing IVF treatment, requirement for protein. And we know that it's it's not safe to take protein supplements in pregnancy.
Yeah.
It actually this growth in the womb, so we don't recommend that. So it is a lot easier to get enough protein from food if you do include animal foods. Yes, I would say that you can get enough protein from plant foods. It's just that pregnancy is such a special time. And then for keto diet, I mean, I have no words to say about the keto diet. Like, that it just refuses to die. It's a bit like the Atkins diet back in the day.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's not sustainable. People come off it and they do feel terrible. They feel terrible on it, they feel terrible off it. It doesn't.
It's funny, a lot of men like it, don't they? Because it's sort of like bacon and eggs and steak and, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
To me, it doesn't feel, you know, I've tried every diet under the sun, but to me, it just doesn't feel right to be eating that way. You know, it's
No.
too fat.
And I'm yet to find a person who's done the keto diet, hasn't had terrible breath and constipation. It doesn't make you feel good. And yeah, sure, you might get that ketone high for a bit and you lose a bit, but it's like, again, with the keto diet, the evidence we have is that it might support children with very, very complicated seizures.
And what about PCOS? Women that want to lose weight, that are overweight due to PCOS?
So with PCOS, dietary intervention can be really effective, but I wouldn't say that the keto diet is the answer. I think with PCOS, it is about being very, very, very mindful of refined carbohydrates in general. So,
yeah.
You know, unless it's a whole plant, it would be best to avoid. Now, not all women have, it really varies in my experience. But, you know, those who do struggle with weight gain, those who do struggle with insulin resistance, definitely looking at a diet that is really rich in whole plants and where the carbohydrates come solely from whole fruits, whole grains. So really, even things like, you know, breads and flours, pasta, right? I'm not saying that you should never eat them again, but they shouldn't form such a staple part of the diet. And
yeah, what I feel sad for some women, Frederica, that I've seen, you know, over the years, they are going through IVF, they are overweight, they've got to get their BMI down below a certain level before they can access it on the NHS or privately. And a lot of these women, just because they're fat doesn't mean to say they're not fit. You know, they are exercising at the gym, they're eating well, their thyroid's under control, and they cannot lose the weight. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, you just touched, you know, it's such a, the simple answer, I think, actually, is that, especially just with the overweight category, I think obesity, there are pathways involved and it becomes more complicated. But with overweight, people who are overweight, we are just sometimes all different shapes and sizes and different ways in which we carry fat, the different ways, like, so I think,
I mean, some BMI is sort of like, it's sort of like changing now, isn't it? People are sort of relying less on it and where your fat is distributed.
Yeah, so BMI really is a public health tool, and it works well for population. So it helps us to understand how disease is distributed across different weight categories, right? But on an individual level, it might not be that useful. So in my lectures, I actually have the slide where I show they have the same BMI, the same height, but their fat distribution is really different. And so sometimes, you know, BMI doesn't tell a different individual. And that can be, of course, it's the same with women. You know, if you have a woman who is metabolically healthy, she has regular cycles, she wants to become pregnant, her nutrition status is good, just being overweight should be a reason why she shouldn't go ahead and have that baby, or have treatment. So it's tricky. I think also providers are certainly becoming more aware of this. So I've had clients in the past who have managed to lose some weight to come from being categorized as obese down into overweight, and they have been they've clearly got a healthy metabolism and they have a good profile. It's just that they are overweight, but I think that, you know, that it's moving in that direction, I feel, and I hope that's the case. And I think we just need to be also really aware of early life factors that might mean that actually not being overweight is not really possible for some people. once they hit adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
And so trying to, promise this magical weight loss that brings down to the other BMI category might not be realistic for some people. So, and it's putting too much pressure on the individual to change things that they can't always change.
Yes, no, I agree. Another question that's come up, and it's a bit of a bugbear for me, is a lot of women that I see sort of that have miscarriages, failed IVFs. Every clinic does things differently, and on the NHS, it's much harder to access some of the bloods that you need that are done privately. So one is sort of like the gene mutation MTHFR. And a lot of women have this and they miscarry as a result, but they're given huge doses of folic acid, which they're not able to metabolize when they should be taking folate. And what I struggle with, even midwives tell people, oh, you need folic acid, you shouldn't be taking folate. And I mean, that is a public health issue, isn't it?
Yes, I think it is actually. So the MTHFR, I think the estimate of 24% women may carry the mutation. So, and you're completely right, folic acid is actually very unhelpful for those people.
Yes, especially in such large doses.
Yeah, so I think generally there's quite a few supplements, including your own, of course, that actually provide methylfolate and folate in the form that everybody can absorb. And I think that moving slowly towards making this the recommendation instead of folic acid. Of course, we're not there yet, but I've certainly seen that more supplements offer methylfolate as an option, and that's a positive. And having people like you to talk about this and actually make people aware that they should be choosing methylfolate in case they don't know what
a lot of people don't. When you start trying for a baby, you're very sort of naive in what you know. It's only when you've got to sort of like your fourth miscarriage or your fifth failed IVF that you start to look at a lot, more things.
The US is ahead of us with this. The US do a lot more genetic testing before they even start undergoing this. Also, if both mum and dad have the mutation, it can really impact baby.
And I've been doing some reading as well because of the baby vitamins, and it is linked to autism as well, isn't it?
Yes, well, yeah, because it's so closely linked to neurodevelopment.
Yes.
So we need to be mindful of that. I completely agree with you. And folate rich instead of just.
Oh, you phased out a bit then.
Oh, sorry. No, so I was saying awareness and helping women to choose like a folate supplement over a folic acid is really helpful, I think. And of course, we don't have sort of the clinical trial data for folate, but we know mechanistically that beneficial for pregnancy because it's the mechanism is the same biologically.
Yeah, no, very interesting. And we're coming to the end now, so I've got what other questions have I got here? And we've covered so many. Oh, thyroid antibodies. Is there any sort of foods or things that somebody should be eating if they've got thyroid antibodies?
That's good. It's a really good question. I will say that I'm not an endocrinologist.
Yeah.
So if someone has thyroid issues, I would highly recommend seeing an endocrinologist, and that's who would diagnose it.
Yeah.
When I support women with thyroid issues, I always work closely with the endocrinologist.
Yeah.
And it's on the present, like the history, because thyroid antibodies can appear for different reasons. Sometimes it's just a really high stress event that can actually cause this sort of inflammatory response, if you will. And for that, then for something like, if that's the presentation, if that's the kind of history, I highly recommend really paying attention to eating as many of those colourful, polyphenol rich plants, extra virgin olive oil, nuts, fish.
Yeah.
And I would really, in these cases, lifestyle is so crucial. So really, really taking time out, maybe taking some time off, walking a day, some sort of mindful practice or writing or therapy if needed. Those are the things that, like a supportive nutrition, healthy, balanced diet. Those are things that really make the switch back to reduce, that inflammatory profile. So those are the main things that I would focus on a general rule, but more, I think thyroid issues have to be handled one by one and with a multidisciplinary team. I think sometimes they're addressed a bit too broadly when actually they're very individual.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always amazed, Frederica, the amount of young women with thyroid issues. You know, maybe we're just diagnosing it better now than years ago, but it's you know, it's quite common. So I'm going to finish. The final one is on about the gut and fertility. And again, from my questionnaires that I give out, I'm amazed at so many women. They'll say, well, what's my gut got to do with my fertility? And it's only now there's so much coming up about the vaginal microbiome and the gut microbiome. And women have irritable bowel, they have constipation, they have diarrhea, they have allergies. So, you know, what can they do? Because the food you're eating, if you're not absorbing or processing it, you're not going to get good eggs and sperm, are you?
No, so absorption issues are really, especially when it comes to people who have things like celiac disease, which is, if it's untreated, you sort of unmanaged, Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, and IBS too. So if you have IBSD, which is very persistent diarrhea, very difficult to absorb the nutrients you need, as you just said. So the first thing I'll say is that we know that the gut microbiome, closely, they're talking all the time. So they're very different, of course. The vaginal microbiome likes to have mostly lactobacilli. It doesn't want to have much diversity, whereas the gut microbiome likes lots of diverse strains. But when the gut microbiome becomes, like, dysbiosis takes place and it becomes sort of unhealthy, it increases intestinal permeability, and we have this movement of unwanted toxins and bugs from the inside of the gut to the outside, where the majority of our immune system lies. And when that happens, the inflammatory status of the body increases, and this is problematic for the vaginal microbiome too, because those messages and those signals of inflammation reach the vaginal microbiome too. Now, the vaginal microbiome is essential for conception and for avoiding preterm birth. It's amazing what a negative impact things like bacterial vaginosis have on fertility, and then the risk of preterm birth. And also, so really,
now to implantation, there are some studies to show that it can have an impact on implantation as well.
Exactly that. So it just basically, if your vaginal microbiome is unhappy, it really will not support pregnancy, which, you know, again, makes sense, because if there is a risk of infection during pregnancy, that increases the risk of all sorts of things happening, including losing the baby. So our bodies are just trying to protect, but it's important that we take care of the vaginal microbiome and the gut microbiome, which is so crucial to maintain the immunity of our bodies, like before we even try to conceive. And, you know, with IBS and all types of IBS, we know that it's very closely linked to stress. So we go back again to this idea that actually in preparing for pregnancy, we have to really reprioritize our own well-being and take the time to make sure that our guts are all ready and primed for pregnancy, not fighting stress or fighting undernutrition or extreme fasting regimes, or all these things that do not give a signal of pregnancy in our bodies. IBS, you know, is a whole topic of its own, of course, but we do know that dietary intervention really positive impact on IBS, together with stress reducing intervention. So really, really simple breathing exercises have been really shown the symptoms of IBS. Breathing a couple of times a day really does activate the vagus nerve response to calm
with the autonomic nervous system. And but it's interesting, isn't it? Because I honestly believe that all these changes you need to make, they don't all have to happen overnight. It's you know, it's a gradual process, but your mindset has to be right, because you can't motivate yourself to change or do anything if you're low, if you're depressed, if you're undernourished, you're not nourishing yourself on every level. It's really important.
And I actually recommend pretty much all my clients who are undergoing fertility treatment to your collective, because this mindset idea is absolutely crucial. And, you know, some people won't have time. And actually, whenever you find out you're pregnant, whenever you decide to make that change, to refocus or mindset your through that pregnancy, which, listen, at the end of the day, 9 months out of our lifetime is not very long.
No,
So,
no, it's not. Yeah.
and then if you are trying to conceive, which a lot of our followers are trying, just making the change in mindset can be really transformational. And whether IVF or not, having that mindset prepares you for both outcomes. And I think that's important, because it's important for both outcomes. It's important for your own physical and mental well-being, because trying to conceive is a very unphysical step. So we have to be set up for that challenge and ready to take it on. Otherwise, it will come outside feeling less well, which we don't want.
No. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think that women look on the outside for everything, for all the answers. And very often the answers are on the inside, just looking after themselves, the breathing, the diet, the nutrition, and all of that.
Movement, connection, you know, nature, all these things. And it's funny you say it, but when it goes and make it a priority in everyday life, it does mean that we have to deprioritize other things. So one of the tips I give my clients is block actual time in your work diary to go for a walk. If you don't out in your diary, it won't happen, because there'll be another meeting put in, or you'll catch up with your emails. So it needs to become one of those negotiable meetings with yourself.
Yes, that's a great way to say it. But it's been fascinating talking to you tonight. Thank you so much. It's lovely to talk to somebody same wavelength and, you know, doing the job you're doing. It's incredible. So thank you so much for coming on. And thank you all for listening. And this will be recorded, so you'll be able to see it on my channel and also Frederica's channel. But lovely to speak to you. And thank you so much.
I'll speak to you soon, Zita. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. And bye, everybody. And as I say, this will be recorded when I come off. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.